Well, this is a 2009 Toyota Corolla with a 1.8 four-cylinder dual overhead cam. While I was replacing the VVT gear on the end of the intake cam, somehow the keepers popped out of one of the valves, and I have no intention of taking this head off unless I absolutely have to. So, I have decided to try to reinstall this valve in place without popping the head off. So, first of all, I had to create a tool to do just that. I welded these bolts onto sockets, onto washers to hold my crow's foot polypolar. And then you'll see right in there a welded together a makeshift spring compressor. I used a little flat piece of steel with a hole big enough in the middle that it would go around the base of the valve, and then welded it on to a couple of bolts coming up to a carrier for my polypolar, which just happens to be a 7/16 quarter-inch drive socket that I had laying around. So, after making these the proper angle, I tightened them down in place, and this is now a compressed spring around the valve seat. Now all I have to do is take magnetized long enough screwdriver and install the keepers into place. Now this is going to be a challenge, so bear with me on this. Now, I've got a speaker magnet on the end of a long screwdriver, which I hope will hold this keeper in place while I install it. And then I put some grease on the inside of it to act as a sort of a glue to hold it in place. Now, once I pull the speaker magnet off, then the magnetism stops and the keeper will hopefully stay in place. I could then spin this around, hopefully, which this screwdriver is actually too magnetized now to take it's not wanting to release it. Now once I've set the keeper in place with a metallic screwdriver, or at least a screwdriver that's been magnetized, I just took something that's not magnetized, like in this case it's just an old welding rod, and I'll spin it around in place to put it where I need it to be so that it's out of my way, and then I can start working with the second keeper. Now, unless you've got a drawer full of these little valve keepers, you have to be very cautious not to drop it inside the engine, because then you have a world of a problem. Obviously having to special order them, because it's almost literally a needle in a haystack to find it. Now, so basically I used my little mechanics magnet to carry them from place to place until I've, from the bench to the car, so that there's no chance that I can possibly drop them. Now, you see, using my grease as a glue, it kind of sucks up to the valve, Now, ideally, if they're in place on the little groove on the end of the valve shaft, this is obviously the moment of truth. Putting a socket on the end of my little pulley puller that I've used as my makeshift spring compressor, I slowly begin, but I probably have to hold this straight with a screwdriver. You almost have to guide it as you move, because if you don't, it'll catch the keepers on the way up. And then just slowly begin to release the tension on it. You can see it's a very close clearance. Once that top of the valve spring washer is up around the keepers, it should hold them in place. Compared to the others, though, I don't look, before I completely drop it onto the valve, I want to make sure that they're in the proper position and in their groove. Now, if you're curious what that little spring compressor that I built looks like, here's a close-up look at it. You see the 7/16 socket at the top, it's all rusted. It was just in a bucket that I had. Every mechanic shop has old sockets laying around. And then I just, 2 bolts, galvanized bolts that I had, and welded them onto a big washer at the bottom, big enough that it obviously gives me room to work with. And then just a regular old crow's foot puller attached using these makeshift bolts that I bolted onto the head, and then bent them back into the proper position so they're straight up and down with the valves. Now, it appears that the valve's on there tight. I just got to clean it up, put that little cap on there like the other valve has, you see, and then set my little rocker arms on there. And we will find out if this thing runs good.